Kinds of variables. Kinds of variables and their uses, presented by De La Peña, Giwan, and Bakay. Introduction. The root word of the word variable is vary, or simply can change. Variables are among the fundamental concepts of research, alongside with measurement, validity, reliability, cause and effect theory. Bernard 1948 defines a variable as something that can take more than one value, and values can be words or numbers. The most common variables in social research are age, sex, gender, education, income, marital status, and occupation. All social research is based on defining variables, looking for associates among them, and trying to understand whether one variable causes another. The nature of variables and data. Quantitative researchers try to count human behaviors. That is, they attempt to count multiple variables at the same time. Generally speaking, variables are classified as one of four types. Allen Titchworth Hunt 2009. Measurement scales. Ratio variables, interval variables, numerical values are in numbers. Ordinal variables, nominal variables, categorical values are in words. Nominal variables represent categories that cannot be ordered in any particular way. Example are biological sex, males and females, political affiliation, basketball fan affiliation, etc. Characteristics. The responses to nominal variables can be divided into two or more parts. A nominal variable is qualitative, which means numbers are used here only to categorize or identify objects. This is the sample of nominal variables: religion, blood type, gender, eye color, strand, hair type, brand of COVID-19 vaccine. What is your religion? Roman Catholic, Islam, INC, Evangelical Christianity, Born Again, and others. Blood type, AB, A, B, and O. What is your gender? Male, female, prefer not to say. Ordinal variables represent categories that can be ordered from greatest to smallest. It has two or more categories that can be ranked. Example of ordinal variables include education level, grade 12, grade 11, sophomore, freshman, income bracket, etc. Characteristics. It is an extension of nominal data. It establishes a relative rank. It measures qualitative traits. It has rank or order. Example: Likert scale, contest ranking, educational level or education level, t-shirt size, large, medium, small, class officers. The lesson was easy to understand. Strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly agree. Education level, grade 12, grade 11, sophomore, freshman. Contest. Winner, first runner-up, second runner-up, third runner-up. Interval variable. Have values that lies along an evenly dispersed range of numbers. It provides information about order and provides an interval. Example of interval data includes temperature, a person net worth, how much money you have when you subtract your debt from your asset, etc. Characteristics. It is one of the two types of quantitative variables. It takes numeric values, may be classified as continuous variable type. It also has ranking or an order, but there is an interval and we can see the differences between the variables. Interval variable sample temperature 40 degrees Celsius, 30 degrees Celsius, 20 degrees Celsius, 10 degrees Celsius, 0 degree, -10. Performance level of students: outstanding, 41 to 50, 31 to 40, very satisfactory, 21 to 30, satisfactory, 11 to 20, fairly satisfactory, 110, did not meet expectation. Grade point average, GPA, test score, IQ test. Ratio variables have values that lie along an evenly dispersed range of numbers, where there is an absolute zero as opposed to net worth, which can have a negative debt to income ratio level variable. That is, you cannot have income or some positive amount of income. Most scores stemming from responses to survey items are ratio level values because they typically cannot go below zero. Characteristics: it has a clear indication of the ratio. It also has intervals. It has ranking or it is in order. Ratio variables. Example: age: 20 years old, 10 years old, 2 years old, 1 year old, 0 year old. Distance: 20 kilometer, 10 kilometer, 2 kilometer, 1 kilometer, 0 kilometer. Height and weight. The 4 levels of measurement: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. We have the categorizes the levels of variables, ranks categories in order, has known equal intervals, has a true or meaningful zero. Kinds of variables: independent variables, control variables, dependent variables, confounding variables, intervening or mediating variables. Dependent variables: those that probably cause, influence, or affect outcomes. They are invariably called treatment, manipulated, antecedent, or predictor variables. There are 2 types of it: active independent variables and attribute independent variables. In some cases, you may not be able to manipulate the independent variable. Some examples are gender, parenting style, learning style, ethnicity, retention in grade, personality type, drug use, non-experimental. Dependent variables: those that depend on independent variables. They are the outcome or result of the influence of the independent variable. The dependent variables receives the intervention. It is also expected to change as a result of an experimental manipulation of the independent variable or variables. Independent and dependent variables. Example: the researcher wants to determine the effect of use of social media in the academic performance of students in mathematics. Independent variables: use of social media. Dependent variables: academic performance. Intervening or mediating variables stand between the independent and dependent variables, and they show the effect of independent variable on the dependent variable. It is hypothetical variable used to explain causal link between 2 variables. Example of intervening relationship: poverty, independent variables. lack of access to healthcare, intervening variable, shorter longevity, dependent variable. Control variables, special type of independent variables that are measured in a study because they potentially influence the independent variable. Researchers use statistical procedures, example, analysis of covariance to control these variables. They may be demographic or personal variables that need to be controlled so that the true influence of the independent variable on the dependent variable can be determined. Control variables. Example, let's say you are testing to see how the amount of light received affects from growth and you change the independent variable. Dependent variables, amount of light. Dependent variables, growth of the plant. Control variables, water and fertilizer levels. Confounding variables, those that are not really measured or observed in a study. They exist, but their influence cannot be directly detected in a study. Researchers comment on the influence of confounding variables after the study has been completed, because these variables may have operated to explain the relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable, but they were not or could be easily assessed. Confounding variables. Example, you collect data on sunburns and ice cream consumption. You find that higher ice cream consumption is associated with higher probability of sunburn. Thus, the mean ice cream consumption causes sunburn. Confounding variables, temperature, hot temperature. It caused people to both eat more ice cream and spend more time outdoors under the sun, resulting in more sunburns. Confounding variables. Independent variables, rate of ice cream consumption. Confounding variables, hot temperature. Dependent variables, number of sunburn. Other example, Patrick Reginiel, 2021, advances these examples of variables. Phenomenon A, climate change. Example of variables related to climate changes: sea level, temperature, the amount of carbon emission, the amount of rainfall. Phenomenon B, crime and violence on streets. Example of variables related to crime and violence on streets: number of robberies, number of attempted murders, number of prisoners, number of crime victims, law enforcers, convictions, carnapping incidents. Phenomenon C, poor performances of students in college entrance exams. Example of variables related to poor academic performance: entrance exam score, number of hours devoted to studying, student-teacher ratio, number of students in the class, educational attainment, teaching style, the distance of school from home, number of hours devoted by parents in providing tutorial support. Independent and dependent variables. Independent variable, IV, usually called predictor or criterion variable. It is known as the cause, can stand alone, not changed by the other variables you are trying to measure. Example of independent variables: age, gender, what people eat, how much time they use gadgets. Types of independent variables. Active independent variables are interventions or conditions that are being applied to the participants. A special tutorial for the third graders, a new therapy for clients, or a new training program being tested on employees would be active as independent variables. Attribute-independent variables are intrinsic characteristics of participants that are suspected of causing a result. For example, if you're examining whether gender, which is intrinsic to the participants, result in higher or lower scores on some skill, gender is attribute-independent variables. Dependent variables, DV, usually called outcome or effect variables, the researcher's subject of interest. They depend on other factors. Example of dependent variables: test scores, growth of plants, experimental. Independent and dependent variables. Test score depends on the number of hours studying for a test. Dependent variable, independent variable. Electricity bill depends on kilowatt use in household. Dependent variable and independent variable. Independent and dependent variables. Using competitive reading games to improve reading comprehension of elementary students in CES. Competitive reading games, independent variable. Reading comprehension, dependent variable.